Well, good afternoon. While I know our committee could have pretty much reconvened at Green and Grain across the street in the Skyway 15 minutes ago, I know that people are still getting back from lunch, but we're just going to begin our first presentation from the budget perspective. And just as a reminder, these things are recorded, and a lot of council members, as things go on, will look back at these presentations, and they're pretty easily accessible online. So first I will welcome our Internal Audit Director, Ginger Bigby. Welcome. Eager to hear your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano, Audit Committee members.
I guess I'll have to start the speaker queue.
City Council.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Chair Palmisano, can you hear?
I just said I don't think I need to start the speaker queue just yet.
Okay. For a department overview, we have a department of 4 full-time FTE, which includes 1 audit manager, 1 senior auditor, 1 staff auditor, and we also have 2 part-time interns who don't necessarily prepare work papers, but they do help us with a lot of tasks on our audits and administrative tasks. Our team reports to the audit committee. The audit committee consists of 6 members, 3 from City Council, which are Chair Palmisano, Council Member Warsami, and Council Member Schrader. Then we have 2 appointed members from the community. The mayor appointee is David Fisher from the University of Minnesota, and the City Council appointee is Scott Neal. The audit committee is chaired by Council Member Palmisano. The change items we're requesting this year item is an additional $40,000 for IT. Our IT fees are increasing. In addition, our IT work coverage is increasing as the city faces additional or increasing IT risks and cybersecurity risk. We don't yet have the capacity to bring that work in-house to our audit team, so we're still having to outsource that work. I also wanted to mention that the internal audit team spends a lot of time helping various departments with consultations. We feel like our consultations and special projects add a lot of value to the residents and to the departments. We proactively address risks and help with the design and implementation of controls. We're hoping to have additional capacity in the future to perform more consultations. At this point, we are completing our audit plan, but we are having to turn away some consultations. And we have a full queue of those that we can do in the near future. Any questions, Chair Palmisano?
Thank you. Any thoughts or questions? I'm pretty familiar with the specific department, so I'm going to let you off the hook early here. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to have the 311 presentation.
Good afternoon.
Welcome.
My name is Trish Glover. I'm the director of Minneapolis 311. I'm going to present my budget today. As you can see, we report to the city coordinator's office, and we just have 1 change request this year, and that change request is for a Verint upgrade. Verint is our CRM, our main computer system that we use. Oops. Anyways, we need to have this update with if the city is moving to Windows 10, our CRM does not support that program, and so we're asking for $203,000 to be able to do that, and then the additional maintenance costs throughout the years for $40,000. And that's the end of our budget this year. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. So I think one of the things I'm wondering about when I came over and visited your call center, you were working on implementing texting as a way of people getting in touch, and that seemed like it was both something that was starting to work and also something that could use some additional tech implementation and continued development to keep strengthening it and allow it to identify more keywords and be more useful. How is that work going, and is that something that we should be investing in, or are we sort of thinking about where 311 goes in the future, so that as people's expectations change about how they ought to be able to reach the city, we're building the capacity to be able to be responsive?
Councilmember Fletcher, thank you for that question. We launched texting in July of this year, 2018, and so far it's very slow going. We're finding that the text messages that we are getting, customers are not understanding, to use a keyword instead of a big paragraph. So we are partnering with communications right now and working on a marketing strategy, a social media marketing strategy. That we feel like we can reach 5,000 to 6,000 people with that for a very minimal amount. So they'll push it on Facebook and Twitter and the FAQs for our texting. That's probably the biggest thing, if we can get people to read the FAQs and then they understand that they are texting to our knowledge base and not an actual person. So then, the less amount of keywords that they put in there, 1 or 2 keywords, is better, and they'll get much better results with that.
Thank you. I have a follow-up, if that's okay. That's great that that's in progress. So one of the things that's challenging about assessing 311 sometimes is that in order for there to be a sort of successful outcome for a resident who calls 311, there has to be both a really good initial interaction and then whatever follow-up and communication needs to happen afterwards. And I think sometimes it's a little bit hard for us to know when we hear from constituents, I called 311 and nothing happened. Where was the breakdown? Is it in the 311 systems? Is it in the way things are getting passed on? Is it in the departments who are receiving the information? Are they following up? But I know that I do get that feedback sometimes, and so I guess I'm curious to hear from your perspective. Are there things that you can think of that would be particularly impactful investments? 24% of the 301 calls come from Ward 3, so I'm really tuned into this set of questions. Are there ways that you can think of that we could improve the ultimate outcomes, given that you control one part of the overall process that leads from an initial call to a happy response?
Right. So 311, we're the initial contact, obviously. And so what happens is once we take that report, we always want to have a first call resolution, meaning that 311 can take care of the problem right then and there. But oftentimes we're just a conduit to the other departments. And so one of the problems that we see is that not everybody has access to our login system, which is our CRM. And some of the resolving departments do have that access, but other ones didn't request it, and so that does slow down the process a little bit. But something also is SLAs. We review the SLAs with our resolving departments every couple of years and see if those are still meeting our needs. But 311, we do the best that we can, and as soon as we send it off, it just depends on what's going on in the city at the time and what their SLAs are. And I know that some of them seem to be a little bit long, but there's always a good reason for why those are a little longer than maybe what people think they should be.
And does the proposed change item related to your CRM have potential to improve access to that enterprise-wide?
Yes, absolutely. It's going to improve, our update that we're going to do this year is going to improve the online form so that people will have more access. But once we get this project that we're working on now and then the update that we're going to do next year, it's going to enable citizens to have easier access to their information, to their reports, where they can have their own login and everything and be able to see and watch and track and follow what's going on with things. So, and always they can call 311 and get an update anytime that they need to. So it's going to be a more robust service for 311, which is something that we really need. And then it's going to help the public be able to have better access as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Ms. Glover, I think you did answer this question indirectly, but that change item page, as you said, residents will be able to access and manage their own cases. Are there going to be efficiencies to be gained, or do you think it will just help further engage more people and thus more requests?
I think that there's going to be efficiencies on the 311 side, as that people will learn to be able to self-service a little bit better. It'll be easier for them to get access to things. And then, I'm sorry, what was your second question?
I just wondered if there would be any efficiencies gained, or if you might just get more inputs.
I think
more
that
requests.
I think the efficiency is obviously going to be on our part because it's an update for something that we need, but it's also going to be for the public. Like I said, it's going to provide easier access for them, and they'll be able to follow their own reports and self-report in a more robust way or a better way than they're able to do right now. Mm-hmm. So right now they can do it through either our website or our mobile app, or call us, and they can do some on texting. It's just a little bit longer process. So I think it's just going to kind of round everything up into one central place that they can do things like that.
Thank you. Councilmember Cunningham isn't with us in person, but he is with us today. He is watching from afar, and he had a couple of questions about this. One of his questions was, are you specifically responsible for the 311 app?
Yes.
And do you have any plans to expand those app abilities any further over the next year?
Right now, we're limited in what we can do. We work with our vendor, See-Click-Fix, and there's just a certain amount of buttons that you can have. So if we add more buttons, then we have to take away buttons. So we are pretty limited in what we can do. I mean, other than changing, the buttons and what the customers can do. No, I think that the new online forms, with this upgrade that we're going to get, the new online forms will make it easier for customers to do other things that the mobile app won't allow them to do.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from my colleagues on 311? Nope. Thank you, Ms. Glover, for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we'll have the NCR report. Welcome, Mr. Rubidor.
Yeah.
Chair Palmisano and committee members, good afternoon. I'm David Rubidor, the Director of the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department with the City of Minneapolis. And I'm here today to present the Mayor's proposed 2019 budget for our department. You can find our budget on page F172 of the budget book. Overall, the budget for 2019 for the department is proposed to be at $11.9 million, a 3.1% decrease from 2018. We have 4 service enhancements that are included in our budget, totaling $615,000, $560,000 of which are one-time funds, and $55,000 would be ongoing. I'm going to touch base on those in a minute, but I wanted to give a brief overview of the department itself. So as a resource department in the city coordinator's office, NCR utilizes the International Association of Public Participation's framework to support the enterprise's engagement work through a broad array of engagement techniques to reach all communities of the city, as well as all cultures within our city. We work to ensure access to resources and programming by all of our residents and inclusion in the city's decision-making process. We currently have 18 FTE on staff, and we provide a number of core services to the city, which I'll highlight here. First of all, we maintain the city's Americans with Disabilities Act action plan. This is a federally mandated requirement. We support departments in being able to address barriers to people with disabilities and also address complaints that residents may have. We maintain also 2 certified ADA coordinators on staff. We also support the city's limited English proficiency plan, which is our language access plan for the city, which the department supports the infrastructure, which has allowed the city to support over a 500% increase into language services for our non-English speaking residents over the last 6 years. We have staff that are dedicated to reaching and engaging the city's major underengaged communities, which include the African American, East African, Latino, Southeast Asian, American Indian, and seniors, and the GLBT community. Examples of this type of work include, in collaboration with the communications department, we host 3 different radio shows in languages, in Spanish, Hmong, and Somali. We supported the Transgender Summit this year. We have been working diligently on the Municipal ID initiative, and we also did quite a bit of work around the Super Bowl. We also provide cultural competency training for city staff and community members, and our learning labs last year was able to reach over 130 city staff and community members. The department is also part of the city's engagement design team and provides comprehensive engagement services to other departments and their ability to reach all people in their city while developing major policy initiatives and/or programming. And we also recently added the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs to expand our services within immigrant and refugee communities in our city. And this year, that office took over the management of the Immigrant Services Fund, which in collaboration with 3 other nonprofit organizations that were able to leverage other money, but basically we're able to support services to over 1,600 immigrants and refugees in our city. In addition, and on final note, is that the city or the department actually also does a considerable amount of work of supporting the city's 70 independent nonprofit and neighborhood organizations. Our neighborhoods have worked on a variety of issues around the city, supported grassroots initiative, and last year leveraged over $2.8 million worth of volunteer time. Our work on that with neighborhood organizations includes compliance and monitoring and support through our neighborhood revitalization and community participation programs, as well as capacity building, contract management, auditing services, and legal support and reporting. As mentioned, there are 4 proposed change items in our budget this year,
Mr.
and I'll go through
Rubidour,
those
let me
in
just
detail.
stop you there. Already there are some questions in queue, so I will ask you to pause to take a comment or question from Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Before you move into the change items, I want to see if I can get a clarification for the record with regard to the action that we are poised to take tomorrow. There is the rumor mill out there is suggesting that dedicating $1.5 million to the Navigation Center would take money away from neighborhood services in 2018 or 2019. Yet there is no change item within the budget for 2019, which would lead me, I think correctly, to believe that that means there is no risk to any neighborhood funding for the remainder of this year or any of next year. I just need a yes or no. Is that correct?
You are correct.
I do understand that we don't have a funding source for neighborhoods going past 2019, but that is not what we're here to discuss today or tomorrow, actually, because funding for neighborhoods is in the base budget of the neighborhood and community relations budget. And it's not being addressed today because there's no change order asked to lower it, correct?
Chair Palmisano and Councilmember Goodman, you are correct. One correction on that, though. The neighborhood program through the CPP program and the department is fully funded through the end of 2020. And so we have actually 2 years before that source of funding comes to an end. But the action that the council is looking at will not affect funding for neighborhoods, does not change that service level at all.
So not for this year, not for 19, and not for 20.
That is correct.
That is a new bit of information, and that's great. Thank you. I just had to get that out because I'm being flooded with emails from people who seem to think that this action tomorrow is going to take money away from neighborhoods this year, which we're already almost done with the year, and next year. And now you're saying not even next year, but not even 2020 either.
Chair Palmisano and Councilmember Goodman, you are correct. Those revenues that you're speaking of are additional revenues that have come in off the TIF. Does not affect that that baseline funding. We are, as a department, looking at sending out a communication to all the neighborhoods today, if not at the latest tomorrow, to let them know that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And now your change items.
All right. So our first change item before you today is the 2020 Census Project. It's a request for one-time funding of $350,000. We are leading and supporting a multi-department request to support the city's effort to actually get a complete count of all of our residents with the 2020 census. As you are aware, the 2020 census is, we are facing a number of great challenges with the upcoming census. Our historically undercounted communities have always been a challenge to be able to count. Youth, seniors, homeless, non-English speaking residents, communities of color, to name a few, have always been a challenge for us to get an accurate count. However, in the 2020 census, we are particularly faced with some increasingly challenging circumstances, such as an increased distrust in government, which has been furthered by both the language and policies that are occurring at the federal level. And I want to really emphasize here, we have a lot at risk. The census data is used extensively to allocate resources. The state of Minnesota alone receives over $8.2 billion in federal funds based on census data. And the state demographer estimates that at least $1,532 per person is allocated by the federal government to Minnesota each year. So undercounting can be very costly. In addition to the loss of federal funds, Minnesota is also at risk of losing a congressional district. So we are at risk of losing some political power in Washington. In addition to these challenges, the 2020 census has even more challenges. Congress has not yet met the growing needs for funding of the Census Bureau for this round. The Government Accountability Office has identified the 2020 census as a high-risk operation. The census has had to delay or curtail testing on critical programs. And for the first time ever, we're going to be having a census that will provide online as well as telephone response options to complete it, in addition to the traditional paper questionnaires, which provides further challenges to be able to educate in the community about how to take the census. And lastly, and very importantly, the proposed addition of the citizenship question being added to the census and its potential of dissuading people from being able to or wanting to take it. So we are collaborating with a lot of other folks in order to address this. We are part of a larger group, regionally based group that includes Hennepin County, Ramsey County, St. Paul, nonprofit partners, and philanthropy to coordinate our strategies regionally in order to be effective and be able to leverage each other's work. We are also working with internally with other city departments in order to maximize our impact and our reach with supporting the census. So we're working with the communications department, the city clerk, IGR, and IT to identify ways we can leverage existing opportunities and really be able to make sure that we have a good count. With this money, we're going to be able to explore other possibilities, such as using radio programs, utility billings, engaging nonprofit partners, and also neighborhood organizations and culturally based organizations to work collectively together to get a complete count of the city. Specifically, the money will be used to be able to increase the capacity to coordinate internal and external efforts, support communications needs such as marketing and media buys, translation services, leverage community partnerships, and support the technology needs. Oops. The second enhancement that is included in the budget is regarding the Americans with Disabilities Action Plan, and there's actually two components to this. It's a request for one-time funding of $145,000 in 2019 and then ongoing $15,000 thereafter. Two specific actions are being requested. First of all, I'm very happy to say that we're looking at adding captioning services for the City Council meetings. In 2016, the City Council approved the Americans with Disabilities Action Plan, an enterprise-wide effort to ensure the city's accessibility and inclusiveness of people with disabilities. In that plan, we identified that live broadcasting of City Council meetings and informational videos was a necessary service. In collaboration with the communications department, funding will be used to buy equipment and software needed to be able to provide live captioning for the council meetings, all the council meetings. It is the city's obligation to provide effective communication under the Americans with Disabilities Act, and this particular proposal will meet this requirement and provide access to deaf and hard of hearing people in our city. I should note that this money, the $140,000 of the $145,000 doesn't go into the NCR budget. It actually goes into the communications budget. Maybe a little odd for department director advocating for another department up here, but as the city's ADA Title II coordinator, it's my responsibility to carry forward the plan, and we decided that I would present this to the council. The second ask in the ADA action plan is what's called the ERA app. This is an innovative approach to assist people with low vision or that are blind to navigate the physical environment. This is a phone-based app that basically uses a camera on the phone that connects to a trained guide that is able to visual or audio describe the environment in which the person is in and help them navigate space. It's a very low cost investment, and it actually provides a great deal of accessibility for people that are blind or have low vision. This technology has been used before. The Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport used this during the Super Bowl and decided that it was very successful out there. And so we're proposing that we add that, we buy minutes on the app, and that we use it in public spaces such as City Hall, the Convention Center, Nicollet Mall, and wherever else we'd like to identify. Both of these action items under the ADA action plan have been reviewed by the People with Disabilities Committee and have been recommended for approval. The third one is Aging Support Services. This is, again, a request for one-time funding of $80,000 in 2019. Our Aging in Place programs address the issues that older adults face to comfortably remain in their homes and community. These programs provide a range of services such as free transportation and chore services like snow removal and grocery shopping. These programs are actually supported by the City of Minneapolis's Minneapolis for a Lifetime Age-Friendly Community Action Plan. Each contract would be $20,000 and would reach a minimum of 1,600 adults across the city. I'm happy to also say that at this level that was proposed by the mayor, we would be able to cover all areas of the city of Minneapolis with this program. And the last change item is for Immigrant and Refugee Services. As I mentioned earlier, we added the Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs this year, which took over the administration of what we've been calling the Immigrant Support Fund. This year, in 2018, the level was at $75,000 one-time funding, basically to support organizations that are providing direct services to immigrants and refugees. In our current environment, the demands and the stress and the trauma that immigrants and refugees are facing in our city are significant, and they're not getting better, they're actually getting worse. What the mayor has proposed in the budget here is to make that an ongoing support from here forward instead of one time at a level of $40,000. And Chair Palmisano, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. I'll invite my colleagues to join in the queue. Mr. Rubador, if just to start, I wanted to ask, could you more clearly help us understand the difference between the census funding on what this funding will do and what the city's proposed role is, as opposed to what the state and federal governments are funding, or perhaps they're underfunding, and that's why we have this change item?
Chair Palmisano, yes, and if it would be the pleasure of the chair, I would like to invite Karen Moe to the podium here to talk about it. She is the program manager and can talk a little bit more in detail about that specific request.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Palmisano, committee members. My name is Karen Moe. I'm Deputy Director of Neighborhood and Community Relations, and in that role, I'll be leading up the effort that our city has regarding the Census 2020 and the Complete Count Committee. It's my understanding that every decennial census, the federal government initiates the count and invests resources in getting a complete count across the country, but that local entities, including states, counties, and cities, have always been asked to play a role in making sure that we support the federal effort. I would say in the 2020 census, our effort, similar to the 2010 census, will be really focusing on our local communities and making sure that the messaging, the strategies that we use are relevant to our local communities. So you can imagine at the federal level, they'll have their whole campaign that will attempt to reach everyone in the country, but we've always, I think as a city, supplemented the work that they do at the federal level. We will not be doing the work of the Census Bureau or of the state demographer. That the actual counting itself happens at the federal level. We just will be supporting them and supplementing the genuinely the education outreach and the outreach around actually completing the census. So with the Complete Count Committee, what we're hoping to do is have community leaders from historically undercounted communities or from organizations that are working in those communities lead our city's efforts, really getting out in the community, having those conversations with community members around what the census is, how it's used, why it's important to take it. And then leading up to the census, encouraging people to actually complete the census itself. With the funding, similar to 2010, our communication strategy will supplement, again, the federal communication strategy. So in 2010, we also did do some purchasing of media buys at the local level. We'll probably be doing that as well in 2020. We also are looking to utilize any resources that we have internally in the city. For example, in 2010, we utilized the utility billing to add an extra layer of making sure we got the word out to all of our community members about the census. Probably be doing something similar to that. In 2010, we also used some of our resources to purchase things like swag, bags and hats and pencils. Probably do something similar in that. So that's kind of the differentiation between what the federal government does and the local city government does. Does that make sense?
Yep, thank you. That helps a lot. Next, we have a question or comment from Councilmember Goodman.
Thanks. David, I just wanted to comment on my support for the ADA Action Plan and interpretive signing services for more meetings. I had the opportunity to go through your office to get a deaf-blind interpreter this week, and they were just top-notch. Your office was great to work with. I know that this constituent really appreciated it, and just to see kind of that we were on top of it, meaning the city, in advance is a really good thing, and it just led me to believe that there would be so many more people who could benefit from that kind of thing. And so I just wanted to let you know my experience with your office. Getting the deaf-blind interpreter was really great, and I can see how that could be something we would want to expand if possible.
Chair Palmisano, Councilmember Goodman, thank you for the compliment. We do take the work that we do with the disability community very seriously, but I appreciate the compliment, and the staff person that's actually responsible for that is here too, so he heard it directly from you.
Terrific. Our next question or comment is from Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much. I had a comment more specifically on neighborhood funding, and I know that we talked a little bit about that in the beginning of your presentation in terms of 2019 and 2020. The funding looks like it's there, but in 2021 it isn't necessarily. Do we happen to have a 5-year projection? I noticed with the ADA action plan, it was mapped out to 2024, that there would be some ongoing funds that would remain added in this. Do we have something that would indicate to our neighborhood organizations and others the 5-year projected funding allocation that would go to a program like CPP or whatever we would come up with in the future?
Chair Palmisano and Councilmember Goodman, the answer to that is no, we do not have that at this time. We are under the CPP program. Well, there's two aspects to that, is that the department receives money from the consolidated TIF right now, which provides funding for our cultural outreach work, the work that we do around the enterprise, which includes things like voter engagement, includes support for boards and commissions, that type of work, the work that we're doing with other departments. Then also about half of that money that we get from the consolidated TIF goes out to support directly with neighborhood organizations. That we are funded through the end of 2020. Come 2021, there is not a plan in place yet about what would cover that work moving forward. Part of what's going on right now is that we're doing our Neighborhoods 2020 work, which, just to refresh council members' memory, if you don't recall it, is an effort where we're working with community to really take a hard critical look at our neighborhood organization work, come up with recommended changes, preserve what is actually working really well, kind of highlight that value, and come back to the council in early 2019 with recommendations, policy recommendations on how to really strengthen that system and address some of the challenges that it has faced. With that, we're also proposing at that time and working with the finance department to come back with recommendations to the council or options about how that work would be funded moving forward starting 2021 and beyond. But at this point, there is not that I'm aware of, and finance could correct me if I'm wrong on this, there isn't a plan specifically in place yet about what happens January 1st, 2021.
Do we have a 5-year projection for your department in total?
Chair Palmisano and Councilmember Goodman, Councilmember Gordon, we do not have that portion of the department covered as well at this point.
So I think that would make sense to have some kind of amendment at least to the budget, that we had a 5-year projection. I know that it's been customary for the last several terms for us to have a 5-year projection, so we would kind of be anticipating what we expect future budgets to be. I know we're not setting a 5-year budget now, but typically we set this budget and we're able to see what's happening. I guess because of the concerns that people are raising about what happens when this TIF district decertifies, and there's a lot of potentials there. There's a potential that could just go for a property tax relief, and we could quit doing the extra work that we're doing now off of that. I mean, could possibly be a fear that staff would have as well about what's their future look like. So that's something I think I might be interested in working on, is let's at least kind of put something out there this year saying, coming to some kind of agreement as this council, we're projecting that we are going to keep funding these. I think the theory right now is, at least in terms of the problem solving I think that staff has done, is when those tax dollars flow back into the general fund, we will have revenue to keep doing what we've been doing. And so just based on what I think is a consensus, I would be interested in queuing up now that I'm planning on maybe working on some kind of amendment, or staff direction or something in the budget, and I'll get some good help with that, so that we could at least tee that up for ourselves and everybody could look at it and say, the council in 2018 said this is what they thought they'd be doing with this money in the next 5 years.
Councilmember Gordon, I appreciate your flagging that. We do want to be flagging things in the budget as we go along, and so this is the first real clear example of that today. But I did also want to call on our Director of Budget, Micah Innermill, because I think he has some things to add to your
Excellent.
questions.
I wasn't watching over here, so I appreciate you did.
Hiding over your shoulder, council member. So just to clarify, we do, in the mayor's recommended budget for 2019, do have that 5-year financial direction that you referenced, and so that is included, and also the TIF dollars flow in and out of the NCR Special Revenue Fund, and there's a financial plan associated with that fund as well in the budget document. So while you're absolutely correct that past 2020 there's not a funding plan in place, I did just want to call out that the documents are there in the budget book itself, that there's no intent to hide a football on this, I guess is the point.
Could I just follow up? So the 5-year projection is for what would be going to neighborhoods, or what's now going to CPP, or you just mean there's a 5-year projection for the department as a whole?
Madam Chair and Council Member, the latter. Yep.
Okay, and is the page open right now on your screen?
It is.
Could you tell me the page number?
E25.
Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Reich.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm glad that this has been highlighted by Council Members Goodman and Gordon, both in what we're actually doing in the near term, but knowing that the near term, the so-called far term, the around the corner is closer than we think in many respects. And there can be a lot of disruption when there's uncertainty in the meantime, even though on the books we're covered, but that uncertainty can have some negative effects as well. So I appreciate that dynamic. But it should be noted that if we put something on paper that says here's our 5-year projection in advance of the work that we're doing in terms of evaluating programmatic, both department, in terms of our relationship with the actual work that happens in the community neighborhood groups themselves, would be a very sort of vague placeholder. I mean, until that work is really laid out. We have to know what we're doing, whom we're going to do with it, and then what amounts and in what manner. And so, but that work is happening, and I appreciate the work that's been going on, but I also appreciate how Gordon's highlighting uncertainty, even if it's abstract uncertainty, it can have a lot of negative effects. And we won't even get the input and participation if people don't believe around the corner there's a commitment.
Thank you. Councilmember Schrader.
Well, on that note, I guess I'm in favor of a vague placeholder. I think that I agree with Councilmember Reich that for all those reasons we are looking at it. But I would just say neighborhoods right now, that they see that there is a plan for having a budget, and they are very aware there's no funding source. And I think they're very worried right now on every account that we're just passively aggressively getting rid of neighborhoods. So I think just some clarity that there's going to be that there is some form of neighborhood groups will be there will be some source, and just to have a little bit more clarity, as vague as it needs to be, would be extremely helpful.
Got it. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. I did just want to clarify that my understanding from some of the finance orientations that we went through is that a significant portion of that money, like half of the consolidated TIF money that's returning to the budget, was committed to the 20-year parks plan. So it's not like we just have the money coming back to the general fund and can continue doing business as usual without making some other adjustments, right? This is actually going to be a pretty tough conversation, because if you look at the current 5-year projections, we're already projecting a kind of significant levy increase, and a decent chunk of the money has been spoken for. So it is very important that we, as we're having this Neighborhoods 2020 project, that we take a very close look at what is the stuff of neighborhoods that feels important enough that we really want to invest in, and what's the investment that we really need to make, and recognize that that it is going to be a set of hard choices, right? That we are going to be asked to do a bigger levy increase than what we're comfortable with, that they're at least looking at the current 5-year projections, that without that placeholder, we're already looking at a bigger levy increase 3 years from now in 2021 than what a lot of us would be comfortable with without any funding for this. So I do want to just flag that we can't just assume that it's business as usual. There is a conversation that's going to have to happen.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I have one. It's on the aging support services piece, though. Can you tell us how much senior support services received in the 2018 budget?
Chair Palmisano, senior support services received, if I recall correctly, $60,000 in 2018. It's been variable a lot. The year before, I think it was down to 20. In 2016, it was down to 25,000. The year before, it was around 70,000. So it's jumped around quite a bit. But last year, if I recall correctly, it was at 60.
I think that's true. I'm just curious, what does an additional $20,000 buy? You mentioned being able to have this available for the entire city, and is that the appropriate amount of money needed for full rollout?
Chair Palmisano, at 60,000, it becomes basically there's about 4 organizations that cover the entire city. When we were down at 25,000, we could not have services, or we could not fund services that covered the entire city. At 60,000, we kind of split it a number of different ways in order to achieve that, but each organization wasn't getting a whole lot of money. So this would actually be able to, I think, more comprehensively and just broader support for that work across the city. So it gets a little tight when you're dividing 60,000 by 4 organizations in order to cover the city. And I think, for me, I'm just speaking personally, when we were down to 25,000, it was a really tough call about where we place that money, and that we knew that, there's just inequities that come from that when you're covering one part of the city with those services and not another. At 80,000, I think we're comfortably covering everywhere.
Thank you. Question or comment from Councilmember Gordon?
Thank you very much. I had a chance to look at page E25, and those are projections, and I encourage people to look at them, and also some of the graphs on E23 and 24 that go, because they are they're demonstrating our projections and what we anticipate coming in. They're not showing any forward-thinking commitments. And actually, if you look at it, you'll notice that everything looks pretty fine up to 2020, when the funds coming in to support the work of the department are at over $7 million, it looks like. And then in 2021, they drop to 0. And to keep the department going, including personnel services, benefits, and contractual services, we're $3.3 million in the hole. So I appreciate that staff's doing the work to be open and upfront about it and spell it out for us. But the projection wasn't just what I was looking for. I was looking for, anticipated commitment from us too in terms of what we'd be putting in there. So
Sure.
Just wanted to let people know, if you're looking up that page later, don't think it's going to be all rosy and good news. It's just the truth of what's going on, and it's exactly what I was talking about.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments for the NCR department? With that, thank you, Mr. Rubidor.
Thank you.
Next, we have the communications department with Greta Bergstrom.
Good afternoon, Chair Palmisano, council members. My name is Greta Bergstrom. I am the city's communications director, and I'm here to present Mayor Fry's proposed 2019 budget for the city's communications department. I will begin with a brief overview of our communications department and our key lines of business before I get into the proposed change items that we are requesting. Our department actively develops and distributes city government information and news to our residents, businesses, and visitors. We want to make sure that they're both aware of and benefit from all of the city's programs and policies and activities. In 2018, we have been in particular focused on becoming more proactive and strategic with our dissemination of information and news so that we more effectively marry our tactics to the specific audiences and objectives that city departments are seeking to achieve. We provide communications services to departments across the enterprise in three primary buckets. First is media relations. The second is digital communications, which has been growing exponentially. And the third is strategic marketing, kind of engagement marketing services. In the mayor's recommended budget, our department staffing remains level at 12 FTEs. While staff have specialized skill sets in various aspects of communications work, for instance, video production or graphic design or media relations, I'd like to stress that their work is typically not mutually exclusive to either of these or the three spheres of work. Cross-pollination of news content developed by our media relations staff, for instance, would be promoted through our digital team and online. Graphic design work that might be developed by our graphic designer for a marketing campaign, for instance, on sick and safe time or organics recycling would also hit the news media as well. And so they are working very collaboratively together. In terms of media relations, we have a team of two that provides message and information development and management to work with reporters and media outlets to deliver both proactive and responsive news and information for the city. This includes significant work with the city clerk's office and its records division in the timely fulfillment of data practices requests. We also provide media training opportunities for city staff and policymakers. In the digital communications sphere, we work in close collaboration, especially this year and ongoing into next year, with IT. The new city website that is in development is a primary focus of our digital communications work this year and will be throughout next year. The new website will be the key digital tool for streamlining city communications with public audiences. Our goal is to develop a new digital site that will serve as really an online front door to city services, programs, and information. We're designing a website for the city that we aspire to be, that's inclusive and welcoming, very accessible and transparent, making sure we're putting the user experience first and foremost. In terms of our video services, we are on track to live broadcast over 300 live city government meetings this year, approximately 25 to 30 more than last year. For comparison, the city of St. Paul airs about 175 live meetings, and Hennepin County 43 live meetings annually. So we definitely have a much higher volume of that. In terms of social media, we utilize video on our social channels and have nearly doubled engagement in the past year, really through a result of a wider range of videos, shorter videos, sharing existing videos more frequently, and promoting those directly to our social networks, as well as sharing the same kind of high quality video over multiple times so that we're getting greater utility from that video product. The third bucket is strategic marketing. I always like to say that there's a big difference between the availability of information and the accessibility of that information. This really requires our team working with subject matter experts across the departments in the city to develop strategies and tactics that will engage and connect with distinct audiences. We're increasingly prioritizing visual communication, graphic design, graphics, imagery, and video content to connect with audiences more effectively, and are working to build plans that have measurable objectives, whether for our internal city audiences, city staff audiences, or externally with public audiences. And I'll move next to the two change items that we are seeking for 2019. The first is a $40,000 enhancement request for cultural radio programming. For the past 2 years, Communications has partnered with Neighborhood and Community Relations in the production of live radio programs on La Raza Radio, with NCR staff member and program host Mariano Espinosa serving our Spanish-speaking community members. Given the success of this program called Mi Ciudad, we have expanded our radio programs this year to the Hmong community, and just this past month in October to the Somali residential community. This funding request will allow our department to continue cultural radio programs in Spanish, Somali, and Hmong in order to ensure access to city news and information for these residents. The $40,000 funding request itself will pay for the 2019 annual contracts with La Raza Spanish Radio, Hmong Radio, WIXK 1590 AM, and Somali American Radio, KALY, which is 107.7 FM. The programs themselves will continue to run every other Tuesday on La Raza from 3 to 4 in the afternoon, the second Thursday of each month on KALY from 2 to 3 p.m., and the third Thursday of every month on Hmong Radio, again from 2 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon. Staff from nearly every department across the enterprise have been interviewed, certainly on La Raza, and will continue to be on the other two programs. I just believe that we are presenting a great new channel, a consistent channel of information and news to our diverse community base, many of whom do not receive information in English. Regarding the city's work on the U.S. Census, which NCR had presented earlier, we do believe that maintaining this programming in 2019 will provide critical channels of public information to help secure a complete and accurate count of all Minneapolis residents. Our second and final request is for $30,000, one-time request to extend service maintenance for an additional year for the technical support and repair of audio and video equipment, editing servers, 2 playback servers, and the council chamber system. These funds will be used to maintain our video and audio streaming services and extend the license for our music production library. If funded, this request will ensure the continuity of access to and transparency for council and committee meetings, board and commission meetings, and government productions. And with the 2 change item requests, this concludes my presentation, and I can stand for any questions you may have.
Thank you. I invite my colleagues to ask any questions they might have of communications. I think I did ask from a global enterprise-wide perspective, maybe how we could be using the comms department with some additional funding instead of doing all of these embedded in other department kinds of communications work. I would welcome your thoughts on it if you have any, but
Sure. You know, obviously the state of communications, which is closely married obviously with technology, especially in the proliferation of digital communications, we're very open to change. I am, of course, and we are, of course, aware of the various communications resources and assets, including vendor contracts and staff in departments across the enterprise. I think that we work very collaboratively and with some consistency with those resources currently, but are definitely open to continuing to look at how communications evolves. Definitely within my own department, we have had some changes in terms of how we look at servicing residents and businesses and getting information out in much more accessible ways. I think there's an opportunity to leverage existing resources, perhaps in more effective ways, and I think there are opportunities to perhaps seek greater communications effectiveness with a study or an audit or some sort of kind of objective analysis of what we already have in place now and where we could make some effective decisions moving into 2019 and beyond.
Thank you for that. I don't see any questions from my colleagues, so I'll just say thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time. Thanks.
Next, we have IT. Welcome, Mr. Dahl. I should point out as they're leaving that Communications did these terrific budget videos, and I would be remiss if I didn't say how wonderful they were. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Palmisano, committee members, Otto Dahl, Chief Information Officer for the City of Minneapolis. I appreciate the opportunity to present the Mayor's 2019 proposed IT department budget. And I'd like to start by just giving you a context of what exactly the IT department accomplishes for the city. And when departments or when there are initiatives within the city that appear or do have technology as a component to their success, those efforts come in on to our intake process, and you will find that the team in the IT Solutions and Engineering Group will start to architect solutions, trying to marry up the appropriate technology or technologies for whatever initiative, opportunity, or issue that someone is trying to solve. Those types of solutions may require us to actually implement some sort of application, some sort of information system on behalf of the city. And that's where you'll see the business services team come into action, whether or not we actually write that ourselves or we actually are making use of some, as we call in the industry, off-the-shelf solutions and potentially modifying those, or at least at a minimum configuring those types of systems to operate effectively within the city. With any information system, of course, comes data, and we have the Business Intelligence and Data Services team that will go in there and structure that information so that it's easy to access, that we can do the sorts of data visualizations, the sort of reporting that departments require for whatever function the software or ultimately the IT solution requires. From there, there may be a need for computing resources to do all this, the actual physical boxes, sort of the things behind the curtain no one ever sees, and that you will find in our infrastructure services group. They're out there ensuring that, as do all these groups, that everything plays nice together, that everything is kept up to date, that there's no residual impact of doing one thing and having another area break. So that's an important service. And where we need collaboration services, as was previously mentioned in the website sphere, or in our ability to have collaborative environments electronically, just like we group people together to do projects physically, we also group their their electronic signature as well, as far as their data, their information, their systems, and we accomplish that through the team and collaboration services. In a more operational mode, I think most people recognize the service desk. You may have used it yourself or your staff in trying to get services enhanced, renewed, refreshed technology, that sort of thing. And also, as another overarching service, you might run across those techs that we send out to deal with your office equipment, tech support staff. They happen to reside in infrastructure services. And obviously, cybersecurity is a big concern, and so we have a team that is devoted to that and works with all other aspects, or I should say all other groups within IT, to ensure that we're keeping the world at bay and we stay safe and are prepared to be able to react to whatever nefarious activities people may be directing our way. And then finally, and not least, is the fact that we do a lot of contracting. We have a lot of vendors in play at any given moment within the city. And so we have a vendor management and contract services group that handles that. Because of the nature of IT and the fact that it has a service fund and that in essence, if you will, I loosely use the term billing, but we ultimately use an allocation model to give a perspective for you and others as to exactly how much the IT spend is by each department. So collectively, these folks manage over 400 information systems and all the pieces that are necessary to make that a reality. And also, we are always usually working somewhere on, beyond all our operational work that comes in, 60 to 90 initiatives that the departments have on our plate at any given moment. And that's been pretty steady over the last 7+ years that I've been here. The first of our three change items is dealing with the Digital City Services Portal, and this is probably more commonly referred to as the website initiative within the city. And as Greta was mentioning, this most definitely is a very important piece of communication between the city residents, the business community, our visitors, et cetera. I'm not going to repeat the things that she talked about. Those most definitely are very applicable to this initiative. I would point out that, for instance, in 2017, we had 4.1 million people access our web presence, and that continues as it has since I've been here to go up every year. We most definitely look to implement a better solution that is much more scalable and cost-effective through newer technologies. What we're currently using today is really past its useful life. It has been somewhat problematic to us technically over the last few years, and so we started back in 2016 tackling this situation. We gathered requirements from the departments, we gathered requirements from the public. We ultimately ran a request for proposal process to select and have selected and signed up for a website content management system. That's a really important piece in the sense that the city has over 300 what we call publishers, which are people that actually put information and manage the information that is in the city's web presence, of which the primary website is not the only one, but most definitely is by far the largest. The departments currently are cleaning up their website presence now and in preparation for being able to go to a new design. and complying with such things as the American Disabilities Act, and also a more standardized look and feel, with the ability that hopefully a visitor doesn't have to understand who does what within the city in order to get the sort of information or services that they're looking for. We also have scheduled later this month, on the 22nd and 29th of this month, sessions with departments to show them where the design currently sits and get their comments from their review of our progress to date as we start to head down ultimately implementing this new web presence by the end of next year. What you see before you in this particular ask is one of the challenges we have is, yes, we make estimates of what it's going to cost. In this case, we had collected money over the last few years for doing the implementation of this new web presence for the city. We then wanted to ensure that we had a good solid number for what it would cost us in ongoing expenses, and that's what you see before you, and that $111,000 per year based on the solutions that we ultimately chose. So that's what you see in this particular request. Second change request is in the city's desire to reduce its use of paper, to be more automated in its processes, to most definitely have its information in an electronic form that can be made use of electronically, that can be visualized more easily because it is in an electronic format. There's really three things that the IT department has to accomplish in that effort. First of all, we have to have the ability for the departments through some sort of electronic document management capability, the ability to physically digitize that paper, to be able to tag it, if you will, to index it so they're going to be able to find it later, to be able to relate it to various things, and then ultimately to actually physically store it. And so that's one aspect of the infrastructure that IT has to ensure is in place and is sufficient to handle the departments going paperless. Second thing is we implemented or looking to implement electronic signatures within the city, which is another piece, so that it gives the departments an opportunity to not have to have paper as the possibly only option for actually doing some function with the city. And then finally, we do need that electronic document storage, of which the majority of the dollars that are shown here is to ensure that we have positioned the city with enough space to be able to do, in particular with the movement of a number of departments to the new building. There's a desire not to have, if you will, paper storage within that facility, and to be more conscientious and have things electronic. And so that's what we're doing here, is ensuring that the infrastructure that's necessary for the departments to be paperless, that we stay out in front of the department's ability to go in that direction.
Thank you. Mr. Dahl, I think last year we gave some money to the city clerk's office for records digitization. How does this relate to that request? Are we duplicating work in different departments, or is this separate?
No, it's somewhat separate, but it's also, some of this is the software that's necessary, has a licensing fee to it. And as more and more departments go down this path, we see more licenses. So it's the same it might be the same spend, but it's for giving the capability to more people across the city as one aspect of, if you will, the commonality between these different efforts.
Thanks.
And then finally, our Emergency Operations Training Facility, or EOTF facility as we call it, requires some upgrades, if you will, technology refresh to the technology that's made use of in that building. That center's been operational, I believe, since September of 2010. A number of the technology components that were put in place back then had a useful life of 6 to 8 years. We're now coming up beyond that cycle, and so we are looking to be in a position to start to refresh that technology. Some examples of technology that we'll be refreshing: the uninterruptible power supply batteries have a life to them, and we need to ensure that those are refreshed. Projection facilities within the institution, considering its uses and the importance of things working and working well and taking advantage of more current approaches to such things as projection of information. It's time for us to work on that. Also, some of the computing servers need to be refreshed that are made use of in that facility. So we're seeking $150,000 to accomplish that. So that the departments, particularly police, fire, and the Office of Emergency Management, but also all departments, for instance, when we call for the activation of the Emergency Operations Center at the site, that these facilities are ensured to operate as people expect them to. And with that, I stand ready for any questions.
Thank you. I don't see anybody in the queue right away here. I did look at your results information, and in the part of results that said infrastructure services, I was curious, are you seeing an impact in moving some of these things to self-service, like passwords, for example?
Chair Palmisano, most definitely. That's probably one of the major things that impacts that part of the operation, in the sense of the service desk gets many calls for people having to reset their password. Ultimately, we have made changes to allow for that self-service capability. Some people have taken advantage of that. We still have a fair amount of promotion, I think, that needs to take place to get more people to take advantage of it. But also, just in general, I think, the staff wants to do more things on their own. And where we can allow them to do that, I mean, you can go out and for some of the technology that's commonly used in the city, you can just go online, look to what is available as options. You can piece things together. You can pass it along to ultimately go through an approval process and ultimately put in electronically without ever having to talk to IT or a person. And so our desire is to do as much as we can from a self-service position, so that we're not taking up IT staff time to do things that, in essence, others can do for themselves. I think it's the nature of the world these days. I mean, we expect that if I want an app and I go out to my smartphone, right, I look it up on the App Store, whichever one you happen to be tied into, and I download it and I roll. And so it's that sort of mentality that we're trying to implement more and more of over time. And so most definitely that does help us. It's just the uptake. We, of course, would like it to be faster, but we're working towards improving that all the time.
Thank you. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Chair Palmisano. Looking at these change items, and I think looking at our IT challenges overall, I know that this is a very complex enterprise, and requests come from a lot of different departments, some of which are similar but not quite the same, and sort of compatible. And so I'm very interested in thinking about, we have a lot of systems. We have a lot of different software systems, a lot of different platforms that don't always talk to each other very well. And I'm wondering how much we're thinking about as we think about upgrades, as we think about sort of new things. In a perfect world, I would love to see us moving more towards systems that talk to each other better. And so thinking about, as we're building an archival system and as we're starting to scan documents in, does that talk to LIMS? Does that talk to, other systems and connect, so we don't have as many of these things as isolation? So I guess I'm curious sort of how you're approaching that, and in terms of this year's change items, can we feel confident that we sort of, took a good look at how to integrate these systems so that we're investing in things that are going to make sense for us and talk to the other systems that we're investing in?
Yes. Chair Palmisano, Councilmember Fletcher, most definitely we have the following approach. First of all, we assess every information system we have, and we have a simple traffic light assessment that's done, and it hangs in my office, and you see the red, yellow, and green. Red being things that are beyond their useful life, yellow being anything within 3 years, and everything else is green. We've really improved that over the years, the last 7+ years. And more importantly, though, when those systems do come up red, when they are in the yellow state, when we start to really investigate the ability, that's the moment by which we start to look at the following approaches to trying to integrate more tightly systems. First of all, in some instances, we may actually combine systems. We did that with ELMS. You've got 4 departments that actually use the same information system. And actually, it's a set of information systems, but the same grouping of capability. And part of that is because dealing with things like permitting and licensing, there are a lot of times when city processes require to be done in some sequence, even though those individual pieces may actually be done by different departments or even different groups within the same department. And so systems like that, to me, that's the ultimate integration that you can get. Second, when we see that people have information that may be useful to others, we have created, and we call it the Analytics Hub, but it's an ability for us to take folks' information, regardless of the information system's ability to talk to others, and get that information aligned within the Analytics Hub, which when analysts from anywhere in the city come in, have the ability to view that information. The tools then that we have for statistics, for analytics, for data visualization, then works on a whole cadre of information that probably comes not only from across multiple city departments, but also from like the county and other partners that we have information exchange with. And so that's another approach that we use, so that at least from a data perspective, folks are looking at hopefully the highest integrity information, but also the data that has been signed off on by the owning department. So, because one of the things we want to avoid is someone making a copy of something and then it goes out of sync with reality over time. And so that's how we get around that, because we keep that data refreshed as the information changes or gets added to, et cetera. So that's a second approach we do. The third approach is to try to get folks to potentially use the same tool that others are using. A good example of this is, for instance, IT started with a product called ServiceNow, which is an ability for us to deliver, if you will, that self-service capability, et cetera. Well, we also now have a few departments that are making use of that capability within anything from dealing with the requests for data that folks make of the city is within the ServiceNow platform. We've got the water department has an application, or water department, the solid waste folks have a system that's being designed for them in that. Some of the benefits of that is the capability for us to manage and potentially integrate workflows over time as more people make use of the same platform across technology. So that's another approach we use to try to integrate processes potentially, not just data or not just everyone using the exact same application. Those are independent applications, but because they're in the same platform, we have some abilities to have deeper integration. So those are some of the techniques that we have as strategies for ensuring that we can integrate and that people can take advantage of what others have, whether that's their data, their processes, et cetera. I hope that answers your question.
Anyone else in queue? I have a couple of quick questions about your results information. One was about your open data participation. I was curious why only 12 of 20 plus departments are being considered for open data participation at this time.
Chair Palmisano, well, everyone is considered for open data. There's no restriction on, from, if you will, ITs and from the technology standpoint. It's the ability of the departments to spend the resources as well as the desire to spend those resources in that effort to make data available to the public. I'm the first to admit it's been a challenge since we first set that data, open data policy back in 2014, I think. It's been a while.
It's been, yeah. So it's been a little more recent than that. But yeah.
Okay, maybe 16. That might have been days.
Could you tell me a little bit more? In one of the analyses here, it says departments have participated in open data at varying rates because of data misinterpretation fears, resource constraints, and low project prioritization. Could you tell me a little bit more about the fear of open data misinterpretation?
Chair Palmisano, of course. Data isn't always intuitive as to what it really represents. And some people argue that through statistics and other techniques, you can make data say anything or come up with any orientation you want to take. We often hear that folks do not want to be in a position where they have to respond to people taking information, misinterpreting that information, and then making statements or ultimately doing things that require the departments to respond to those orientations. And I think that one of the things we've attempted to do with the open data process that we have is an important piece of it is a business glossary. The ability for us to define and make people understand what the information really means, what its limitations are, so that people don't misinterpret it or use it in ways that they just may not know some of the nuances of the information, so that they won't turn around and feel that they may have the best of intentions, but because they don't know enough about the information, most definitely they don't know the information as well as the departments do, that they ultimately come up with a view that's really truly not supported by the data. And so that's a common thought stream that we see from a number of folks from across the city.
I see. Mr. Dahl, I know that your plan is to head into retirement, so I just wanted to say that how much I appreciate, and I know I said it at Enterprise Committee, but some of the things that you're leaving behind here is that something that I attribute a lot about your leadership as you address the city's internet bandwidth limitation. You've established IT outsourcing strategies that have changed over time. You spearheaded a community outreach program to really address the digital divide, including the technology donation program. You've helped modernize our city IT systems. You established that data and analytics team that I think is going to help us with even more open data kinds of initiatives. And you've really led our IT organization to become a highly performing and highly engaged group. The employee engagement survey from IT looks great. So thank you. Thank you for your work, and thank you for setting up this budget for years to come.
Yeah, thank you.
So with that, we'll move on to the next one. We're running about 15 minutes ahead of schedule, and we'll have Patience Ferguson come on up.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm going to give an overview of the 2019 budget for human resources as well as the one change item that HR has.
Ms. Ferguson, I'm going to ask you to step a little bit closer just because we're
Is that better?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yes, thanks.
So I'm going to just spend a brief moment on the Human Resources Department overview. As many of you know, within the last year, the Human Resources Department has made quite a bit of changes in its service delivery model. And there are some key themes that we looked at when we made these decisions in terms of changing our model to really help the city as an enterprise look at the current and future trends as it pertains to the workforce. One of the things that we looked at is what did we want to project as an enterprise in terms of human resources and human capital. So there are some key themes that we have worked on to ensure that our organization chart really reflects where we believe the city needs to go. One of them is around taking an enterprise-wide perspective as we look at human capital, shared accountability for results, being data-driven as it pertains to our human capital that helps us make decisions about our employees, a cultural agility focus, commitment to learning and development and process improvement, and really helping our departments that we work with as well as you see us as business partners. We are not here to do things to people. Our goal is to do things to work with you to help achieve solutions that are in the best interest of the city. And so what you see in terms of our organization chart, we believe really reflects human resources in our current state. We have about 56 full-time employees, and our recommended budget is approximately $9.8 million. We also refined our mission. A lot of times what has happened within our organization, we've only looked at attracting. We changed our mission to say to attract and retain the best workforce to serve our community. So our change item request is regarding our human capital management systems. Our current system as it stands is around 21 years old. It is expensive to maintain and support. It is not an integrated system. Currently, we have contracts with 6 vendors that currently support the human capital management and payroll system. The change item dollars that we have asked are to help us explore moving to a new integrated cloud-based system. We believe that this system is key to future business and workforce-related initiatives and operations. We believe that it will create stronger efficiencies, and it will also create a better employee experience. The monies that we're asking for will help us to get a consultant to help us document the business requirements in human resources and finance, and to assist in the preparation of a request for proposals. Our outcomes that we're hoping that happen, if we find that we really do need to pursue this, is that it could result in an annual savings of up to $1 million. We believe that we will also have much more functionality than we currently have, and we believe that going to a new system would help us recoup our initial investment over the course of 4 to 5 years. It'll also increase the capabilities of not only the enterprise, but also we can give a better response rate to some of the key human capital kinds of things that need to happen with our employees, and also the reports that we need to give to our stakeholders both internally and externally. And this proposal is jointly in agreement and shared by and in collaboration with Human Resources, IT, as well as the Finance Department. I am now available to stand for questions.
Thank you. I'll invite questions from my colleagues. None? I'm sorry, we don't have any questions for you.
Well, thank you very much.
You've just killed it. Thank you, Ms. Ferguson, for your time. With that, we'll invite up Finance and Property Services, and don't expect for you guys to get out of here with any questions. Mr. Ruff.
Chair Palmisano, members of the committee, I'm Mark Ruff. I'm the department head for Finance and Property Services. If you don't mind indulging me, since we are a little bit ahead of schedule, oftentimes I'm in front of you talking about sort of boring things, right? Money. This is really, I see as an opportunity for me to talk about more interesting things, and one of the more interesting things is our department. Some of you are aware that we actually have a very broad department. We have over 250 people in Finance and Property Services. A big chunk of those folks are within our property services area, so the people who take care of our buildings, who fix our buildings, and those are police stations, fire stations, public works facilities. And then we also have a substantial number of accountants within the controller division as well. A quick story for you. I think back, the first person I ever met who was a public servant happened to be my grandfather. And I didn't think about this until I actually started working in this building, but my grandfather, when he was 80 years old, was the custodian in Pierce County Courthouse in Rugby, North Dakota. And my grandfather had two habits that my grandmother didn't particularly appreciate. One was he chewed Copenhagen, chewing tobacco on a regular basis. And then the other was he only lived 3 blocks away from the courthouse. He tended to open up the jail cells and bring the prisoners home for coffee. And my grandmother would have, would be making treats for them. And so after a while, she discussed that with him, and he was no longer allowed to bring people home. But he still kept chewing Copenhagen until he died at 101 years old in his own home. But I think about that on a regular basis from the standpoint that this is important work that's done, and I'm glad people who don't have to work till 80, like my grandfather, who didn't have much money in his life. But at the same time, Property Services does provide opportunities for people to move up into the enterprise. And we have a number of people who are examples with that in our department. About half of our division managers have been with the city for more than 20 years, and the other half, like Lori and me, are very new. I want to also say that I actually have a pretty easy job. My job is easy because we do have quality staff. I really want to highlight Lori Johnson as Deputy CFO. She does not receive as much, I think, recognition as she deserves on in terms of the breadth of the areas that she oversees. You can see from this chart, she works with our new payroll director, Katie Coro, as making sure people get paid on a regular basis, meeting all of the requirements. Ali Solomon Ahmed is in charge of revenue and collections. Ali's a good example of somebody who came up through the organization. He started in traffic control and is now in charge of that. Pam Fernandez in charge of procurement. I'm going to talk about procurement, but a very important part of our enterprise, not only how we buy things, but how we manage our contracts and how we pay our bills. And then directly, the areas that I oversee have more to do with budget, development, finance, property services, as I mentioned, and then investments, capital, and debt management, as well as risk management. So again, a pretty broad department. Part of what keeps me coming back day after day, really being excited about coming to work, is the quality of people that we have within this particular department, and certainly want to recognize those who are in the chambers with us, as well as I'd be remiss to recognize our high-quality budget staff. Gina's just walking in, Jeffrey, Robert, Brad is not here, but the people who day in and day out work to make sure that all of the information is in front of you that's necessary. So again, it's fun to brag about good work that's being done within the enterprise, and I just don't get a chance to do that often enough because we are talking about oftentimes more serious matters, but I certainly feel very much supported. And I also, as many of you, like to embarrass Nuria and heaping some praise on her as well. She is a great person to work for. I report directly to Nuria, and as she mentioned this morning, there is never a time where I can't text her and get her attention and get her to respond to a very pressing matter. So I think we're also very fortunate to have leaders like Nuria within the organization. We have a number of change items. The first and foremost is number one on my list was the Finance Fellowship. This, if you recall, was also a program that we asked for and thankfully you as a council granted, which is a goal of two things. One is people coming out of college don't necessarily know that a city is a great place to work, and that's particularly true. As I said, a number of our folks are accountants, and for most people in a college degree in accounting or even a business degree with a minor in accounting, they maybe get one course or one chapter in governmental accounting, but it never occurs to them that maybe the state or the county or the city or a school district is a very interesting place to work. And so this is a program that was actually started by Ramsey County, and we've copied that. Lori was very instrumental in working through with our unions and with some of the local colleges on really setting up a pathways program, because I see this, and part of the reason last year and this year what we are doing as a department is devoting some of our existing resources. So you'll see 2 FTEs on there for $100,000. In reality, the cost of this is going to be much more, probably closer to $185,000 per year. The increase, the change item is just $100,000, but we are out of our own department resources paying for the other FTE, because we think it's that important to, number one, get quality recent graduates into the city employment system. We know that when people get into the system, they tend to stay. They find interesting work. It is also a way that we meet our objectives in terms of a diverse workforce. Ms. Ferguson, who just presented, represents Human Resources Department, who has laid out enterprise-wide a very laudable goal of having diversity within our enterprise of 41% people of color, 46 or 47% women. Our department exceeds actually its 46% goal for women. We are at 47% as a department. We are lagging in people of color. We have 25% of our employees people of color. We are doing better on hiring. I think in the last year, Lori has given me some statistics that we are at about 33% people of color of new hires. But this we see as an opportunity, and the 2 people that we hired last year with this program were people of color and exceptionally qualified people. I think Lori said it in the interviews, and Lyle as well, and just we were blown away by just the experience that they brought, and very happy with it. So again, an area that we think is very important, and just want you to know that that is first and foremost on our minds in terms of meeting a goal that has been laid out by the council as well as Human Resources. Second change item It's $500,000 one time. The previous item was ongoing. It's Village Trust Financial Cooperative. The mayor highlighted this in a speech that he gave about the importance of creating banking opportunities for people who have been underbanked in the past. This is not a new program to the city. Actually, Mayor Hodges originally proposed $50,000 for the same institution. Mr. Intermel, through the Budget Division, has been overseeing that contract, and we have been receiving regular updates from Village Trust on their progress, and we can say that we are very impressed with the work that they are doing, in particular focusing on small business lending, on providing alternatives to very high-cost payday lending, and certainly also see this as an opportunity of one of the longer-term council goals that has been laid out, which is diversifying the types of financial institutions we as a city do business with. So while we don't have any specific business relationship with Village Trust at this time, it's this type of organization that we can see supporting that is an alternative to working exclusively with larger banks. And we have been doing that through our investment portfolio already, and we just see this as another opportunity to further that council goal. Supplier diversity staffing, as I mentioned, procurement division for us is one of our most active divisions. They oversee right now over 6,000 contracts for the city. And on a regular basis, we have 1,500 informal or formal bids that procurement oversees, as well as about 1,800 professional service contracts, new contracts on an annual basis. That is supported, the 6,000 ongoing contracts is supported by 1 FTE right now. We have 3 FTEs to help support in terms of buyers for all the other types of procurement work that is done. And we certainly endorse the city's and the mayor's council's emphasis on supplier diversity. That is, again, not something new for the city. Our division's been involved very much in working in cooperation with coordinator's office and with civil rights on increasing supplier diversity, increasing our reporting of supplier diversity. Frankly, we see this position as one of its real values, is one, being more user-friendly to the businesses that are looking to do more work with us. We are implementing new online portals that is being tested right now with the convention center, so that people don't have to fill out so much paperwork in order to enroll in even Target Market and other programs, but they can do it all online. They can see more of what the bids more readily accessible through an online portal, and we see this position, in addition to enhancing that work, also being able to then review all of the contracts that come through from other departments, either as renewal or new, and doing more work to push back on departments, not in the sense that departments are trying to get around the rules, but frankly they don't maybe always understand what the rules are, and doing more regular kind of emphasis on a more diverse group of people and businesses that we do businesses with. I, like any other department head, have a comfort level of just working with the same people over and over again because we know it's efficient, doesn't take long to put it together. Already our procurement department works very hard at pushing back on departments, on helping departments in an educational process, and because of a lack of staffing, we are not able to undertake that as comprehensively as we would like. So this, again, is a very high priority for us as a department. A new budget system. So we see many IT requests come forward. Mr. Inamal can certainly answer any specific questions on this. He spent a great deal of time. We have had some money to test this new budget system that was granted previously by councils. One of the ideas that is being discussed right now is a biennial budget. Our current budget system would not be able to support a biennial budget. In addition, our budget team spends a great deal of time, and to produce a budget book is still a very manual process. And so this would enhance our ability to, again, move away from just processing of paper and do more budget evaluation over time with our existing staff as well. The offset there is some existing costs versus what the new cost on an annual basis would be, and so the net impact is $200,000. The last change item is associated with the fee study that was done recently, and Mr. Innermill and his staff did a great job in reviewing a number of our business license and other fees. We recognize that it's not just about increasing revenues, but are there ways that we can reduce expenses to help hold down fees? And so one of the items that we have asked, and the mayor put in the recommended budget, was to do a study for a small 1 or 2 or 3 set of fees as to say, what are industry standards for how often we should be inspecting? Are we below or above that? And are there ways we should be modifying our regulatory processes? And so certainly would be looking for feedback from council, the EDRS committee, in terms of which of those fees should be undertaken in that particular review. So with that, Madam Chair, that's the end of our presentation. Again, just want to really thank you for the time and for the opportunity to work for the city. And I also just want to say that we as a department really appreciate the opportunity to play the role. And when I say play the role, I mean actually walk the walk and talk the talk of doing our best to remain a source of information that is as unbiased as any kind of human being can be in an unbiased process. And I also want to thank both you as the council and the mayor for giving us the space to do that, because we all know that budget decisions and financial decisions can easily be seen as staff taking one side or another, and we work very hard at being as neutral and as thorough as we can in terms of being responsive to you as elected officials. And again, that can't be done unless you give us that support, and we really just do appreciate the support that you do give us to be able to play that neutral party. And for us, we're not really wedded to any particular outcome other than we just want to make sure everybody has the information and there's some integrity in the process, and also the business of the city is operated as efficiently as possible. And so I think I just want to thank our staff and hold them up for you as a group that does that very well. Thanks again for the time.
Thank you. I don't see any questions in queue right now. I should be asking about an hours of questions, I am told, but I won't. Thank you for your whole team. You do help us through some of our most challenging times in terms of arguments about where money and funding should come from, and you always do it with the highest level of integrity as civil servants, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate that. And yes, and to your team, yes, you are also some of the real unsung heroes that walk around here every day. I have a couple of questions about the results piece, just to be very brief. One of them was about our utility billing system, which I have gotten some inquiries about from constituents, and I'm just curious, in regards to the customer correspondence and our kind of older utility billing system, do you see any efficiencies that could be gained here in terms of utility billing processes?
Well, Madam Chair, the short answer is yes. There's always efficiencies that can be gained. Our staff, our utility billing staff, is working very closely with Public Works on automated meter reading and associated IT improvements in that particular area of utility billing. So I would say that work is currently underway. And if you would like us to set up some metrics to be able to measure that, I don't know that we have, and Lori can certainly comment, I don't know that we've gone very far other than just still trying to work through what that system's going to be able to report back to you. But I see that as one of the main opportunities for us as a city, and I think that that's a huge undertaking just in terms of just being able to place all the antennas where they need to be so we can actually get accurate meter readings for people's water bills. Other than that, Laura, I don't know if you have any other issues that you're aware of in terms of efficiencies that we are facing right now. So.
Chair Palmisano, council members, I know that our staff have been intimately involved with Public Works in working through that system to come up with efficiencies, including the water meter replacement. We do issue a lot of bills very timely. Those payments come in timely, but we're constantly working at new ways of being more efficient, offering more ways of payment, better ways of doing business. As to the specifics of those, I personally don't know those, but I do know that our staff are working on them with Public Works, and we've had a few bumps in that process and had to delay a few things, but we diligently are working through those issues. And if you want more specifics, I could certainly get back to you with those.
No, I just wanted to note for my colleagues that, for example, the 2017 customer correspondence, there were almost 74,000 calls just about utility billing, and that's quite a lot for one department to handle.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Councilmember. We do have a call center. We have a high volume of calls. We do make sure that we answer those promptly. We have metrics around those. They do a monthly report that indicates how long people are on hold, how long each phone call lasts, and we do extensive training for each one of those customer service representatives so that they are well informed when they actually begin taking those calls. So yes, we do have a high volume of calls that come through, and also some emails that come through regarding utility bills.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't see anybody else in queue.
Madam Chair, I just want to mention one other thing that I appreciate about our Revenue and Collections Department, that we try to provide as many forms of payment for utility billing as possible. And one of the new options that we provided over in the last year was for people who, for example, don't have a checking account or have credit cards. They can actually go into many local retail institutions and pay their utility bill through that local retail institution. And we as a city cover the cost of that retailer processing that. So I just want you to know that that is something that we try to be very cognizant of, is that a number of people don't have transportation to come downtown to pay in person. And so we try to be as user friendly as possible in some of those options. And I'm very happy that our utility billing folks bring those things forward, and I know that that was a recent, within the last 2 years, change that council approved.
Thank you. Seeing no other further questions, I'd like to thank you. I'd like to make a motion to receive and file the following department budget presentations. We had Internal Audit 311, NCR, Communications, IT, Human Resources, and Finance and Property Services. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carries. And with that, we've completed our agenda for today. We're adjourned. Thank you.